B'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to learn sukkah Daf Yud. We're going to start from the Mishnah at the top of the Amud. Says the Mishnah, and this Mishnah is going to be split into two parts. The first part is going to speak about when there's an airspace someplace within the schach, how much airspace, where's the airspace, and when does the airspace actually split the sukkah to say that the walls on one side are no longer attributed to the schach on the other side and the sukkah is posel. And the second part of the Mishnah is going to discuss schach posel, not having an airspace, which is the absence of schach kosher, rather schach posel, which is actually having a covering with something which is not allowed to be used for schach. Says the Mishnah, Hirchik es hasikuch min hadafanois shloisha tvachim psula. So the Mishnah is at the moment speaking about just near the walls. And we've spoken in a previous sugya when the walls do not reach the schach. Here we're talking about when the schach does not reach the walls, which means that horizontally there's a gap in the schach, on the roofing there's a gap between the walls and the beginning of the kosher schach. So if you distance, if there's a gap of 3 tvachim between the wall and the schach, that means there's a gap of 3 tvachim of airspace within the area that's supposed to have schach, then psula, the sukkah, is posel, which means that we totally disregard the wall on the other side of that gap of air. Obviously, if you've got 4 walls and you have a strip of air of 3 tvachim adjacent to one of the walls, that wall will be out, but the other 3 walls will still be kosher. But 3 tvachim of air separates and severs the schach and the sukkah. And that's all the Mishnah is telling us about airspace. And now about schach posel. Bayis shenifchas, if somebody had a regular house, and we've already discussed previously that a house cannot be a sukkah, at least not before you deal with it, is an issue of taseh v'lo mina. Also, even assuming that the planks that make the roof would be considered schach kosher had they been put there for schach, either way, the roof of a house is not kosher schach. Bayis shenifchas, what happens if they made a hole in the roof, in the ceiling of the house? They made a hole, v'sikech al gabov, and where the hole is, they filled it up with schach kosher. However, they didn't remove the entire ceiling, they left a strip of roofing, of ceiling, all the way around the schach, which was possibly holding the schach, but there was a strip all the way around that was not kosher schach. So, if the distance from the walls to the beginning of the schach is 4 amos or more, psula, then it's posel. However, if it's less than 4 amos, then we say doifen akuma, we assume or we pretend it's halacha l'Moshe Messina, that we're virtually speaking as if the wall bent, and then we can pretend that the wall actually did reach the schach kosher, and then it's okay. But that's only up to 4 amos. 4 amos and more, we don't say doifen akuma, and it's posel. Another example, and the Gemara is going to discuss why the Mishnah is going to give us 3 different examples of seemingly the same halacha. So the first one was if you're inside a room and you took away part of the ceiling and filled it with schach. If you have 4 homes all the way around, circling a courtyard in the middle, and you have these balconies, so to speak, you have these pillars holding some roofing going around the courtyard and an open airspace in the middle, and you put schach on that open airspace, but you need walls. And these achsadras, these porches that are protruding from the homes, they do not have a wall on the outer edge, on the edge to the courtyard. The only walls we have is the walls of the homes themselves, which are distanced away from the schach, the width of these achsadras. So the same will be there, that if the width of these achsadras is less than 4 amos, we can say doifen akuma, and the area in the middle is kosher. If it's 4 amos or more, we cannot say doifen akuma, and you will not have a kosher sukkah. The third example, sukkah gedola, if you have a very big sukkah, a regular sukkah, shehi kifua b'davar she'ein masachin boy, and for whatever reason, all the way around the edges of the schach, you covered it over with something that was posel schach. And now the area in the center, which is the kosher schach, is removed somewhat, is distanced from the wall. Im yesh tachtov arba amos, if the distance of the posel schach going all the way around is 4 amos or more, we cannot say dofen akuma, the sukkah is posel because it doesn't have any walls. If it's less than 4 amos, then we can say dofen akuma, and the walls, the outer walls of the sukkah, actually are serving the schach itself, and the area underneath the schach is kosher. Im yesh tachtov arba amos psula. Says the Gemara, Kol hani lomoli. Why did you have to give me 3 examples of dofen akuma regarding a sukkah with schach posel? Number 1 was the bayis shenifchas. Number 2 was the chotza mukefes achsadra, and number 3 was the mesachachin with the davar shein mesachachin boy. Why do I need all 3 examples? Answers the Gemara, tzricha, I need them. If the Mishnah would have just told us, bayis shenifchas, you have a room, and you've removed the ceiling of the middle of the room, and you've only told us that over there, in that case, up to 4 amos, we can say dofen akuma, not more. Then I would have thought, mishum dahani mechitzos lebayis avidon. Since the walls in this sukkah, when these walls were made, they were made to serve the area inside this room. This is a room, and this room was built to be used for the inside of this room. The walls are serving the inside of the room. Just now I need to transform it from bayis to sukkah. So I knock out part of the ceiling, I put kosher schach. But it makes sense that the walls, we should use dofen akuma and say that the walls are bending in towards the area inside the room, because the walls were initially created to serve this room. So then we can understand. The walls were made to serve the inside of this room, which is now the sukkah. But I may have thought that in the case of the chotza, hamukefes achsadra, that has these porches all the way around, the mechitza is lav lachsadra avida. Which walls are we using? The walls of the houses. But it's the outer wall of the house which is now going to have to be dofen akuma, bent towards the courtyard, in order that the schach in the middle should be attributed to those walls. Maybe a maloi. Maybe in that case we don't say dofen akuma. Maybe dofen akuma we only say that a wall gets bent, virtually speaking, in the direction that the wall was initially created to serve. So in the first case, it's doing that. In the second case, you're using an outside wall of a house to be, so to speak, bent towards the courtyard. That's an added element of chiddush, and we wouldn't have known that had they not said explicitly that even there we say dofen akuma, only up to 4 amos. That's as far as dofen akuma takes us. Tzricha, that's why we need the second case. And if the Mishnah would have only just told us those 2 cases, the bayis shenifchas and the chotza mukefes achsadra, I may have thought mishum de sichachon b'schach schach kosheru, that the schach, is the material of schach. It's wood. Typically the roofs there, the ceilings were made of wood. Just we have an issue. Since it wasn't made for a sukkah, it's made for a bayis, we have an issue of ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asui. Indeed it's possible, but it's the materials of schach kosher. So I may have thought that a type of sukkah where the roofing, so to speak, is made with materials of schach kosher, but there's an issue of ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asui, only then we say dofen akuma, we, so to speak, bend the wall towards the schach to make the sukkah kosher. But in the case of sukkah, but in the case of that third case in the Mishnah, the final case in the Mishnah where you've got a big sukkah and you actually put a strip of posel schach on the sukkah, there may be the schach poselu, then the actual schach is not something which is ro'ui, it's not able to be used as schach ever. I may have thought that we don't say dofen akuma there. Tzricha, that's what we need the third case in the Mishnah to say, that even there we would use the principles of dofen akuma and up to 4 amos, and the sukkah will be kosher. Continues the Gemara. And now we're going back to the concept of 3 tfachim of airspace that passes a sukkah. Omar Rabba, Ashkechinu l'Rabbanon de Beirav. Rabba said, I met with the Rabbanon de Beirav, and they were the Chachomim that were in the yeshiva of Rav, and they said over in the name of Rav, the Yosvi Ka'omri. They were sitting and saying in the name of Rav, Avir Poisel B'Shloisha. Airspace passes a sukkah with 3 tfachim. Schach posel, however, schach posel Poisel B'Arba. Schach posel passes with 4 tfachim. So in this version of the Gemara, on Amud Beis we're going to have a different version. But in this version of the Gemara, Rav as said over by the Chachomim in the Yeshiva of Rav, held that schach posel is 4 tvachim and airspace is 3 tvachim. V'aminalu ana. And I, Rabbah, responded to them, because I, Rabbah, disagree. I agree with them that the airspace is 3 tvachim, that it puzzles. But for schach posel to be an issue, it's got to be 4 amos, not 4 tvachim. Not like Rav held. V'aminalu ana. Avir de poisel b'shloisha minalachu. How do you, Chachomim Rabbanon de Beirav, how do you know that schach posel puzzles 3 tvachim minalachu? Titnan, because look in our Mishnah. Hiruchikas asichuch min adafana is shloisha tvachim psula. In the case of 3 tvachim of airspace has nothing to do with doif and akuma. Doif and akuma you can only say when you have something solid on the roofing and it's just inappropriate, it's the wrong schach, you can say that it's as if the roof is bending and as if the walls are bending towards the schach. But you can't say that with air. With air, there's no difference if it's adjacent to the walls or in the middle of the sukkah. And the Mishnah says, schach, that the airspace is 3 tvachim pasels. Schach pasel nami, look in the same Mishnah. What's schach pasel there? Lo lifsel elo ba'arba amos. Ditnan, look in the Mishnah. The Mishnah tells you that how much schach pasel renders the sukkah as invalid as pasel is 4 amos. Ditnan bayis shenifchas v'sikich al gabav im yesh bin asikuch l'koisel daled amos psula. You can see that in the same way as the Mishnah mentions 3 tvachim for airspace, it mentions 4 amos for schach pasel. So Rabbah maintains, I see from the Mishnah, schach posel is always an issue only with 4 amos, not with 4 tvachim. V'omruli, and the Rabbanon de Beirav said to me, Rabbah, bar minodahi, don't bring proof from the Mishnah. The Rav and Shmuel, Amr Tarvayu mishum doif and akuma noguba. Rav and Shmuel both explained that the 4 amos in the Mishnah is only talking about 4 amos on the edge of the sukkah, where we can use the logic or the halacha l'Moshe Missinai of doif and akuma, a bent wall. And there everybody agrees, even the Rabbanon de Beirav agree that on the side of a sukkah, schach posel only puzzles from 4 amos. But in the middle of a large sukkah, schach posel puzzles with 4 tvachim. It's got nothing to do with our Mishnah. Don't bring proof from our Mishnah that schach posel in the middle of a sukkah puzzles only from 4 amos. And Rabbah says, now is bringing another challenge against the Rabbanon de Beirav. That the Rabbanon de Beirav say that airspace puzzles in a sukkah 3 tvachim and schach posel 4 tvachim. He says as follows: Ilu ika schach posel pochis me'arba. What would be if you had 3 tvachim, less than 4 tvachim, let's call it 3 tvachim of schach posel. Va'avir pochis mishloisha. And you had 2 tvachim of air adjacent to the 3 tvachim of schach posel. What's going to be halacha? Everybody agrees. Ksheira, it's going to be kosher. We do not combine part of the measure of schach posel and part of the measure of airspace and say that it splits up the sukkah and it's posel. So everybody agrees it's kosher. What's going to be now malya bishpudin? If you fill up that airspace with spits, with posel schach, psula, it's going to be posel. So you have an interesting phenomenon. I had 3 tvachim schach posel. The sukkah was kosher because it's less than 4 tvachim. I have 2 tvachim of airspace next to the schach posel. The sukkah is still kosher because we don't give any reference or any value to 2 tvachim of airspace. So the sukkah is kosher. Now, what is a more stringent type of psul? What makes a sukkah posel quicker? Airspace or schach posel? Airspace, everyone agrees, airspace 3 tvachim on its own, and the sukkah is already posel. With schach posel, it's 4 tvachim and on, which makes the sukkah posel. That means it's easier to posel a sukkah with airspace than with schach posel. So how can it be that you have an airspace of 2 tvachim next to 3 tvachim of schach posel, and the sukkah is kosher? Fill up the airspace with schach posel, and now the sukkah is going to be posel. Because now you've got 4 tvachim and more of schach posel, because the 2 tvachim of airspace is now filled with schach posel. Together with the 3 tvachim of schach posel that was there before, you have 4 tvachim and more of schach posel, and the sukkah is going to be posel. Does it not make sense to say that airspace, which is more stringent because it's posel b'shloisha, it pasels the sukkah with just 3 tvachim, schach posel should be at least as stringent as schach posel, which hapoisel barba only pasels with 4 tvachim, and having a strip of airspace in and of its own right next to the schach posel should render the sukkah posel. And nobody says that. How can that be? And somehow, we'll soon see how, but somehow Rabbah is using this as a claim against the Rabbanon Debei Rav, against Rav, because you Rav say that schach posel is 4 tvachim, avir is 3 tvachim. There's no good reason in the world that the avir next to the schach posel shouldn't combine and make the sukkah posel. Somehow, according to Rabbah himself, who says that 4 amos is the measure of schach posel, this issue would not apply. We have to understand why, and indeed, that's exactly what the Rabbanon Debei Rav are now going to respond to Rabbah. V'omru li, ihacha l'ditcha, you Rabbah as well. L'ditcha nami, the omra schach posel posel v'arba amos. You say schach posel pasels with 4 amos, and avir airspace with 3 tvachim. We have exactly the same question. Ma ilu ikka schach posel poches midaled amos. If you have schach posel of 4 amos less a tefach, sukkah's kosher. V'avir pochis mishloisha, and next to it you have 2 tvachim, less than 3 tvachim of airspace. What's going to be the halacha? Ksheira, it's going to be kosher. It seems that everybody agrees that airspace and schach posel do not combine. Malya bishpudim, but if you fill up the airspace with schach posel, what will be the halacha? Psula will be posel. We have the same question against you, Rabbah. Lo yehe avir aposel b'shloisha k'schach posel aposel barba amos. Would you not say, Rabbah, that airspace that passes in an area as small as 3 tvachim should not be lighter, should not be more lenient than schach posel, which passes with 4 amos? And if 4 amos of schach posel passes, then of course an airspace of which something passes in something as small as 3 tvachim should combine with the schach posel. And if you have less than 4 amos of schach posel next to less than 3 tvachim of avir, of airspace, they should combine and make the sukkah posel. And I, Rabbah, explained to the Chachomim in the yeshiva of Rav as follows. Hi, Mai, what sort of question? How can you ask the same question against me as I asked against you? We have a fundamentally different understanding in schach posel, and therefore your question would make sense. And my question against you is valid, your question against me is not valid. According to me, says Rabbah, I maintain that when the Mishnah said 4 amos on the side of the sukkah pasels, I said it was nothing to do with Dofen Akuma. Mishum shiura, v'lav shiurahu. It's all dependent on a halacha l'Moshe Messinai of 4 amos. That's how Rabbah understood the Mishnah, not the halacha l'Moshe Messinai of Dofen Akuma, of a bent wall, and then it would indeed only apply at the edge of the schach. I say that the 4 amos in the Mishnah is anywhere in the sukkah, halacha l'Moshe Messinai, 4 amos of schach posel pasels, and then that v'hai lav shiurahu. And if in the case where you have 4 amos less a tefach of schach posel, it doesn't have the necessary shiur of 4 amos. And the fact that you have airspace next to it, well, airspace is a completely different area. It's a completely different measure. Since the airspace is 3 tvachim, schach posel is 4 amos, each one independently has its own measure. And there's a halacha l'Moshe Messinai that says schach posel is posel with 4 amos. Less than 4 amos, it doesn't pasel. It doesn't matter what you have next to it. You can have avir there, airspace, which airspace has a more stringent measure. It's still not going to make a difference. The halacha l'Moshe Messinai is that anything less than 4 amos of schach posel doesn't pasel. Because the two, if airspace and posel schach would have the same measure, they would both be 3 tvachim, or both be 4 tvachim, or both be 4 amos, then we can understand, possibly we would combine them. But here, there's a shiur for schach posel, there's a shiur for avir, and that's that. We don't combine them. So don't ask a question against me, Rabbah. But you, Rav, where does 4 tvachim come from? There's no halacha l'Moshe Messinai that says 4 tvachim in the middle of a sukkah is posel. The Mishnah didn't speak about 4 tvachim. Where do you get this from, that schach posel is 4 tvachim? You just understood that it's mishum hafloga. that since 4 Tvachim is considered a significant area in a number of places in Halacha, as we've already seen previously, so you're taking it for granted that if you have schach posel 4 Tvachim, it's a significant area to sever and separate the two parts of the sukkah, rendering the sukkah posel. So he says, if according to you, Rav, that it's 4 Tvachim, it's just a logic of what separates a sukkah. Mali ispalig b'schach posel, mali ispalig b'schach posel va'avir. What's the difference if the sukkah is split up with 4 tvachim of schach posel, or if it's split up with 3 tvachim of schach posel and 1 tefach of avir? What's the difference? At the end of the day, the schach is split, the sukkah is split. And that is what Rabba's question was against the Rabbanon Debei Rav. And the Gemara doesn't answer that. They don't answer that. We're just left with this machloikas that, according to the first version, Rabbah holds avir is gimel tfachim anywhere, schach posel is 4 tfachim, is 4 amos, anywhere, and the Rav holds avir is 3 tfachim anywhere, schach posel in the middle of the sukkah is 4 tfachim, and on the sides of the sukkah is 4 amos, doifen akuma. Omar le Abaya. Abaya asked as follows, and he's asking against Rabbah. Because what did Rabbah say? Rabbah said that according to himself, that the 4 amos is not a logic, that it's a significant measure that separates a sukkah. No, according to Rabbah, he says the 4 amos, anywhere, on the sides and in the middle, is a din in haloch l'moish misinai of schach posel, and the reason he doesn't merge the schach posel with avir is because they have 2 different measures, and therefore we don't merge, we don't blend the 2, combine the 2. Says Abai, I've got an issue with that. Ulamar nami, against you, Rabbah, also. Nehida lo shavu shiurayu, granted that the measure of schach posel 4 amos and the measure of avir 3 tvachim are not the same. That's only b'sukkah gedola. In a large sukkah, that's not going to be the same. In a very large sukkah, you can have 3 amos of schach posel, it won't passel the sukkah. And you have 3 tvachim of avir, it will passel the sukkah. And we can understand in a big sukkah, we can play with these 2 measurements independently. B'sukkah ketana, however, in a very small sukkah, if you have a sukkah of the minimum size, 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim, milay shavu shiurayu, in that case, in that particular sukkah, is the measure of the psul of schach posel and the psul of avir not identical? And if they're identical in any one sukkah, we would say they have something in common. If they have something in common, you should be able to combine the 2, even in a big sukkah where the measure is not the same. Why in a small sukkah are the 2 shiurim the same? Because you need schach of 7 by 7 tvachim. And if you have 3 tvachim of avir, then that's it. You don't have 7 tvachim of avir, or of schach kosher. And if you have 3 tvachim of schach posel, then you don't anymore have your 7 tvachim of schach kosher. If you have less than 3 tvachim of schach posel, then it's such an insignificant measure that even though, let's say you have 2 tvachim of schach posel, even though it's 2 of the 7 tvachim of the schach that you need, the sukkah will still be kosher. We don't say lovud. Lovud is only ever said with airspace, but there's a concept called toiras lovud, the measure of lovud. Less than 3 tvachim is insignificant across the board. So if it's got less than 3 tvachim of schach posel, the sukkah will still be kosher. 3 tvachim of schach posel is significant enough to say that, I'm sorry to say, but you don't have 7 tvachim of schach kosher here. Your sukkah is going to be posel. So in that minimum size sukkah, the amount of avir and the amount of schach posel is identical. Since they're identical, they have something in common. They have something in common, then we can combine them even in a big sukkah. And the question against Rabbah comes back. Answers the Gemara. Omar le, Rabbah answered back to Abaya, Hasam lav mishum deshavi shurayu la'adodiyum. The reason that in a very small sukkah, in a minimum size sukkah, the 3 tvachim of schach posel passels, even though normally according to Rabbah it would be 4 amos, is not because in a small sukkah schach posel has something in common with airspace. No, airspace, the shear is 3 tvachim, and schach posel in and of itself, what would render, as far as the schach posel is concerned, passeling the sukkah, you need 4 amos. We have a different issue. It's like, forget the schach posel, look at your schach kosher. I need 7 tvachim of schach kosher. You have 7 tvachim of schach kosher? You don't have 7 tvachim of schach kosher. Your sukkah is posel. Not because of how much schach posel you have, but because of how much schach kosher you don't have. and therefore it's not anything in common between airspace and schach posel, and therefore Rabbah sticks with his opinion that 4 amos is the shiur, is the measure of schach posel in a big sukkah, and providing that means less than 4 amos of schach posel will not pasel the sukkah, again provided that you have 7 tvachim of schach kosher. And then up to 4 amos of schach posel does not pasel the sukkah, up to 3 tvachim of avir doesn't pasel the sukkah, and that's Rabbah's opinion. Ask the Gemara another question against Rabbah. Where do you get this from, that if the two things that have an independent measure, a different measure, we cannot ever combine them? This seems to contradict a Mishnah in Masechet Kelim. In Masechet Kelim it talks about the different sizes of materials, what's called significant, what's called a clothing, a piece of garment, that it's got the halachas of a kli, a utensil, and can become tomei. So habeged, if it's made of cloth, shloisha al shloisha, 3 by 3 tvachim, is significant, it's called a beged, is tomei. Less than that is not considered a utensil, is not tomei. Hasak, something which is a little bit coarser than regular material, arbo al arbo, in order for that to be considered significant, it needs to be 4 by 4 tvachim, 3 by 3 tvachim would not be significant. Ha'ir, hide, which is an even thicker and coarser material, chamisha al chamisha, it's got to be 5 by 5 tvachim. Mapats, if it's a mat made of reeds, shisha al shisha, it's got to be 6 by 6 tvachim to be considered a kli. V'tani alam, we learned in a Mishnah in Kelim, based on regarding these different materials, that habeged v'hasak. What happens if you have a piece of material that part of it is cloth and part of it is sack? Cloth itself, 3 by 3 tvachim, already makes it a kli. Sack only 4 by 4, which means that beged, the cloth, is more stringent. It's quicker to become a utensil than sack. And the Mishnah says that if you have part beged, part sack, which means if obviously the sack cannot be mashlim, cannot complete the measure of beged. That means if you have 2 tvachim of beged, 1 tefach of sack will not make that roy lekabel tumah. Because it's true that beged, 3 tvachim is roy lekabel tumah, but sack needs 4 tvachim. But if you have 3 tvachim of sack, then obviously 1 tefach of beged combined to it will make it roy lekabel tumah. The same with sack and oyer. If you have a piece of material that is partly hide, whose measure is 5 by 5 tvachim, but it's too small, there's a part missing, and you're mashlim the 5 tvachim with sack, that in and of itself already becomes tomei with 4 tvachim, they combine. Ha'oyer v'amapa, it's the same, mitztarfim zeim zeh, they combine with each other like we explained. So you see clearly that even though sack, oyer, mapats, and beged, they have different measures, nonetheless, they can be combined to make a single kli, which is roy lekabel tumah. According to you, Rabbah, that anything that doesn't have a similar shiur does not combine. How are you going to understand this Mishnah? Answers the Gemara, Hosam kedaktoni taima there. If you look in the Mishnah actually tells you why. Omer Reb Shimon matam hoil v'roy letame moishav. Because Reb Shimon says that there's a certain type of tumah, a tumas ziva, where beged, sack, oyer, and mapat all have the same measure, a single tefach, letame moishav, and that this tefach is, that means if you cut any one of these pieces of material into a gently cut, a nice smoothly cut tefach by tefach, it will become tomei, because you can use it as to make a patch on a saddle cloth, which somebody can sit on, and there's a tumah called Moshav V'zov sits on the saddle cloth, it can become tomei. And a single tefach by tefach is significant enough from all these materials. And since regarding tumas Moshav, they all share the same measure, which is a tefach by tefach, then we say even regarding other tumos, then like tumas medras and other tumos, we say that these different materials can combine with each other. Kedetnan, we also saw this in a Mishnah, hamaktzea, if somebody trims mikulon from all these materials, tefach al tefach, tomei, it's tomei. Asks the Gemara, tefach al tefach lemay chazi. What can you use a single square tefach of any of these materials for? Since you can use it as a patch to be put on the saddle cloth on top of a donkey, therefore it's roi for a tumah called moishav, and they share this measure. All these materials share the same measure, therefore we can combine them. But we don't find anywhere that schach posel and avir ever share the same measure, and therefore in that case Rabbi says they do not combine together, and less than 4 amis of schach posel next to less than 3 tvachim of avir, they will not be combined, and the sukkah is kosher. So to summarize what we've seen till here, Rabbi says schach posel in the middle of the sukkah is 4 amis, and Rav says schach posel in the middle of the sukkah is 4 tvachim. B'surah omri lahosh maita b'haylishna. That's how we learnt in Surah. B'nardah masna, however, in Nardah we learnt it a bit differently. Omer v'yodam Shmuel. It was Shmuel that held schach posel be'emtza poisel ba'arba min atzad poisel ba'arba amis. What we said before in the name of Rav in this version is actually in the name of Shmuel. The Shmuel says that schach posel in the middle of a sukkah is 4 tfachim, and on the side is 4 amis. Everyone agrees with that because of Doifin Akuma. V'Rav Omar. Rav is saying what Rabbi said before. What Rabbi said before against the Rav in the first version is Rav saying here now against Shmuel. That Rav is saying bein min atzad bein be'emtza arba amis. That Rav holds in this version that even in the second, even in the middle of a sukkah, the sukkah is only going to be posel if the schach posel of 4 amis. And now the Gemara is going to ask a question against Shmuel. The Shmuel who says that schach posel in the middle of the sukkah pasels with 4 amis and not less, we're going to have an issue with that. What did we learn in the Mishnah on Daf Yudaled Amud Aleph? Tanan, nosan oleo neser, if somebody puts in the sukkah, on the sukkah, and at this point we say even in the middle of the sukkah, neser, a plank, shurochav arba tfachim, that is 4 tfachim wide, ksheira, the sukkah is kosher. So bishlei mile Rav, according to Rav, we can understand why it's kosher. The Omar, because he says, bein be'emtza bein min atzad ba'arba amis. Rav says that 4 tfachim never pasels a sukkah. It may well be considered schach posel, but it doesn't pasel the sukkah. It can be mitztarif to more schach posels if it's schach posel. Whether it is or isn't schach posel is a sukkah we learned on Daf Yudaled. But it might be able to be mitztarif to a larger, to mitztarifim to 4 amis of schach posel if it's schach posel. But it definitely doesn't pasel in and of its own because it's less than 4 amis. So bishlei mil Rav the Omar bein be'emtza bein min atzad ba'arba amis mishum hacha ksheira. That's why the sukkah is kosher. Elo l'Shmuel the Omar be'emtza ba'arba. According to Shmuel, who says that if you put a plank of schach posel in the middle of the sukkah of 4 tfachim, and just by the way, Shmuel on Daf Yudaled Amud Aleph explicitly said that everybody says that a plank of 4 tfachim is considered schach posel. And in the middle of the sukkah, we just saw now, according to Shmuel, that in the middle of the sukkah is kosher with just 4 tfachim. So according to Shmuel, whichever way you hold it, this sukkah should be posel. Answers the Gemara, Hachab Mayaskinon min atzad. Shmuel agrees that schach posel on the side of the sukkah is 4 amis because of Doifin Akuma. So the Mishnah there is talking about when you put the plank on the side, and there Shmuel will agree that the sukkah is kosher. Continues the Gemara Toshima. And now we're going to discuss the 2 versions. That means everything we're going to see from here until 3 lines from the bottom of the Omud is now going to be discussing exclusively Rav. And we'll remember, on Daf Yudaled Amud Aleph we saw that according to Rav, he holds that planks of 4 tfachim wide are a machlokes Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda whether it's called schach posel. Reb Meir says it's called schach posel. According to Reb Yehuda, it's not called schach posel. According to Shmuel, says that everybody says that planks of 4 tfachim wide are called schach posel, and the machlokes is by 3 tfachim, and between 3 and 4 tfachim, that Reb Meir says it's called schach posel and Reb Yehuda not. But 4 tfachim, everyone says is called schach posel. But Rav said on Daf Yudaled that 4 tfachim, according to Reb Meir, is schach posel, according to Reb Yehuda is not schach posel. And that's Rav on Daf Yudaled Amud Aleph. Rav we saw here, we had 2 versions in Rav. Rav in the first version Rav in Surah, Rav of what we saw in Amud Aleph, Rav holds that in the middle of a sukkah, schach posel pasels with 4 tfachim. According to the second version, the Nahardah version of Rav, that schach posel in the middle of a sukkah pasels with 4 amois. And now we have to make sense of all this. So the Gemara is now going to be discussing exclusively the 2 versions of Rav and how this works. Tashema, we saw previously, with this, we already mentioned this on Daf Yudalid. Shnei Sadinim, and this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. We saw already on Daf Yudalid Omid Beis that the Tanakam of this brayso says Rabbi Yehuda that Shnei Sadinim mitztarfim. That if you take 2 pieces of cloth, of sheets which are schach posel, and each one is not the measure of enough to pasel the sukkah for schach posel, but you put the 2 pieces next to each other, they're big enough, mitztarfim, they combine, and the sukkah is posel. Shnei nesorim, however, 2 planks, ein mitztarfim. And we're talking here, this is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says that 2 planks, even if they're 4 tfachim wide, they're called schach kosher. That you can put the whole sukkah with planks of 4 tfachim, and it would be lekatchila. So of course, ein mitztarfim. And the Gemara before discussed, why are you talking about mitztarfim, not mitztarfim, it's schach kosher. Just say it's kosher, but that's what the Gemara, that's what the brayso means. Ein mitztarfim. Reb Meir omer, Reb Meir, however, holds, nesorim kasadinim, that planks of 4 tfachim are considered schach posel, and since they're considered schach posel, then they do combine, like we said, that 2 pieces of sheets combine. So now we have an issue. According to the second version of Rav, the Rav in here, Amud Beis, the Rav of Nahardah, who says that schach posel in the middle of the sukkah pasels with 4 amois, then I can understand my mitztarfim. What does it mean that Reb Meir says that planks of 4 tfachim, they combine? Who are they combining to? Mitztarfim la'arba amois. Even though Reb Meir says a plank of 4 tfachim is considered schach posel because of gzeiras tikra, but in and of its own, it cannot make the whole sukkah posel. So, but in order for the sukkah to be posel, you need to combine it to 4 amois, because Rav, according to the second version of Rav, Rav holds that the sukkah will only be posel if you have 4 amois of schach posel. But according to the first version of Rav, we saw in Amud Aleph, Rav according to Surah, that be'emtza ba'arba, that in the middle of the sukkah is posel with 4 tfachim of schach posel, then heichadomi. Then Reb Meir over there, who says that the planks of schach posel are mitztarif, what's it talking about? If it's talking about that they are 4 tfachim wide, and that's why they are considered schach posel, then lamalud itztarufei. What are they being mitztarif to? What are they combining to? Then it's 4 tfachim wide, it's schach posel, and according to this version, 4 tfachim is schach posel, pasel zal sukkah. You don't need to combine anything to anything. But if they are not, these planks are not 4 tfachim wide, and don't forget this is all in Rav, and Rav holds that planks of less than 4 tfachim, even according to Reb Meir, is called schach kosher. Kanya ba'almaninu, it's kosher reeds, it's normal schach kosher, and that schach kosher won't combine with schach kosher to make a sukkah posel. So how are we going to put all this together? Says the Gemara, la'olam de'ispu arba. The truth is that we're talking about that planks of 4 tfachim wide, because in Rav says that according to Reb Meir, 4 tfachim wide planks are called schach posel, less than 4 tfachim are not schach posel. You're going to ask a question that according to this version of Rav, that only 4 amois in the middle of a sukkah, that according to this version of Rav, that 4 tfachim in the middle of the sukkah pasels the sukkah, so why do you need mitztarfim? Mitztarfim la'arba amois min hatzad. Mitztarfim means that if you have planks of 4 tfachim, and a number of planks, quite a lot of planks, to make up the 4 amois of dofen akuma, then we say mitztarfim, because dofen akuma works up to 4 amois, even though schach posel is 4 tfachim. But schach posel on the side of a sukkah is just an extension of the wall. So we say that Meir holds mitztarfim, that we combine all these planks in regard to dofen akuma. And we already mentioned on Daf Yudalid Amud Beis that this is difficult to understand, because what's the difference? You are mitztarif, you're not mitztarif. Dofen akuma applies till 4 amois. What does it mean mitztarifim le dofen akuma? Dofen akuma doesn't need the tziruf. Dofen akuma is a fact that a wall is seen as bent up to 4 amis. And we saw that the Aruch LaNer on Daf Yudalad Amud Beis explained that if you have 4 amis of schach posel, but the last bit of schach posel of the 4 amis is actually a plank of 4 tfachim, which is protruding beyond and outside the 4 amis. And that's what it makes a difference if mitzdarfim or not mitzdarfim. If we say that it's not mitzdarif, then we say doifen akuma goes till 4 amis. It's as if that's an entity of its own. What's left over, which is going to be less than 4 tvachim in the area beyond the doifen akuma, which is supposed to be sukkah, is less than 4 tvachim of schach posel, the sukkah will be kosher. However, if you say mitzdarfim, then the rest of that plank that's protruding beyond the 4 amis will be included and be combined as with the doifen akuma. It will be as if you have a wall which is coming over more than 4 amis away from the wall. It will not be considered as 3 tvachim of schach posel. It will be considered as a 4 tvachim of schach posel that's protruding into the sukkah, and the sukkah will be posel. That's the Aruch LaNer on Daf Yudalad. So that's how we've understood this Gemara. Continues the Gemara. Toshema Sichacha b'nesarim, and this is actually a brisa that was brought as proof to Shmuel, that Shmuel said before that planks of 4 tvachim wide, everybody says it's chach posel. Planks of 3 to 4 tvachim is machlekes. Rabbi Meir says it's chach posel, Rabbi Yehuda says it's not. Sichacha b'nesarim shel erez, if you put schach with planks of cedar wood, sheyesh ben arba, they're 4 tvachim wide, divrei hakil psula. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda say it's posel. Ein ben arba, if it's between 3 and 4 tvachim, then Rabbi Meir poist. The Rabbi Meir says it's posel because of gzeras tikra. Rabbi Yehuda machshir, Rabbi Yehuda says it's kosher. Umoider Rabbi Meir agrees that if you have a sukkah full of boards of schach posel, which according to Rabbi Meir is, according to this brisa, is either if it's 4 tvachim planks, or if it's planks between 3 and 4 tvachim. Sheim yesh bein neser leneser k'meloi neser. If you have a gap between each plank is the width of a plank, and you remove the plank, that means if every second plank you remove, or more accurately, if you have a plank of schach posel, and then next to it the same width schach kosher, and then again the same width schach posel, same width schach kosher. Sheim yesh bein neser leneser k'meloi neser shemaniach pesel b'neim. That you put psal, which is kosher schach, in between them, uksheira, then the sukkah is going to be kosher. That's what we saw in the brisa there on Daf Yudalad Amud Beis. So the Gemara is now saying, Bishlei meleman de Omar bein be'emtza bein minatzad daled amois, according to the opinion that holds that the sukkah, even in the middle of the sukkah, is only possible if you have 4 amois, mishum hachik sheira. Then I can understand that the sukkah will be kosher. If you have planks of schach posel that don't make up 4 amois, I can understand that the sukkah is going to be kosher. Elo leman de Omar, according to those opinions, that be'emtza ba'arba, that sukkah is possible if you have in the middle of the sukkah a board of 4 tvachim, am I kosher? Then why would it be kosher? So what? Rabbi Meir is saying that if you have kosher posel, posel kosher, posel kosher, posel kosher, the sukkah is going to be kosher. Why? If the posel boards are 4 tvachim, then, and according to the opinion that 4 tvachim, besides for being schach posel, but the 4 tvachim pasels the whole sukkah, if so, if you have every second 4 tvachim, you have 4 tvachim of schach posel, the whole sukkah will be posel. What's Rabbi Meir saying? It will be kosher. And we've already discussed this in 2 occasions, also on Daf Yudalad Amud Beis, also on Daf Tezvav Amud Aleph. And what we mentioned there, in the name of Rashi took it from the Gemara here. Omer Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua. Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua says as follows. We're talking about besukah deloi havya elo shmoina. We're talking about a sukkah which is 8 amos, exactly 8 amos by 8 amos. 8 amos means you have 12 sections of 4 tvachim. Mutzum tzomis, it's exactly 8 amos. Oskinon, that's what we're talking about. V'yohiv, and we split it into 2, the sukkah. 4 amos, which means 4 amos is 6 times 4 tvachim on one side, 6 times 4 tvachim on the other side. On one side is neser upesel, upsal, v'neser upsal, v'neser upsal. On one side you start 4 tvachim board, schach posel, 4 tvachim schach kosher. 4 tvachim psal, 4 tvachim schach kosher, 4 tvachim schach posel, 4 tvochim schach kosher. Then you've got to your middle of the sukkah, and the last 4 tvochim in the middle of the sukkah is schach kosher. And now do the same on the other side, mehaigis on one side, and the same v'neser upsal, mehaigis, so do the same on the other side. Then if you do on both sides, you start 4 tvochim of schach posel, kosher, posel, kosher, posel, kosher. You can have 2 sections of 4 tvochim in the middle of the sukkah of schach kosher. Each one is 4 tvochim. In the middle you have 8 tvochim of schach kosher, and you have less than 4 amos from the edge of those schach koshers to the walls. You say doifen akuma, and the middle part of the sukkah is schach kosher. To have a shnei pselim be'emtza, you have 2 parts of 4 tvochim of schach kosher together in the middle. Ve'ika hechsher sukkah be'emtza, you've got hechsher sukkah in the middle, and that is what we saw before, that Reb Meir says that is moida that this sukkah will be kosher. And whether you can sit under the kosher schach, which is those sections, those 4 tvochim parts of kosher schach, which is within the doifen akuma, so to speak, Rashi here seems to say that you are allowed to sleep under those areas, under the schach kosher, but it's a big challenge that, because you've got boards of 4 tvochim separating it from the walls, and therefore it should not really be kosher. Tosfos and Daf Yudaled Amud Beis actually asks that question on Rashi, and Tosfos, there's a long Tosfos to explain this, but we've made a basic reading of the Gemara, and Emir Hashem in the next shiur we're going to continue from here.